Bailey and Anderson bowl Lancashire into pole position at Lord's. Lancashire travelled to the home of cricket to make their bow in this season's County Championship, as the 2016 Division 1 champions hosted the 2017 runners-up. How the mighty have fallen, and yet both have aspirations to reclaim their top-flight status. Gubbins was the first opener to find the ropes with a pair of fours off Onions in the 6th over. But Sam Robson, who'd fared better in his second innings at Northampton with 41, was not to follow suit, departing in the 7th, caught by Maxwell off the bowling of Anderson for just 3. It was to be the only highlight for the visitors in the morning session, however, as thereafter Gubbins and new man at the crease Eshkenazi were the dominant forces at work. The pair built sensibly throughout the session, first of all completing their 50 partnership and then reaching lunch on 84 for 1. After the interval, Gubbins quickly brought up his half-century and pressed on with a series of beautifully timed shots to the boundary. Eshkenazi too moved to 50, and with the score onto 117 for 1, they brought up the 100 stand. Gubbins fell for 55, LBW to Bailey, but Dawid Malan came to join Eshkenazi and picked up where he'd left off at Northampton. With 150 on the board, Middlesex were coasting again, but Bailey finally made the breakthrough when he cramped Eshkenazi down the leg side, and the number 3 fell for 75. So at tea the score, although good, was not perhaps quite as dominant as it could have been, 175 for 3 the total. Into the evening session, and Lancashire seized control. First, Anderson removed Milan for 24, Jennings with the catch. Then Morgan followed, caught Jones off Bohannon for 8. Simpson was bowled by Maxwell for 2, 5 overs later, and Holden became Anderson's third victim, Jones with the catch to leave Middlesex 206 for 7. Harris fell for 3, Guest with the catch off Bailey, and Finn was caught. Jennings bowled Bailey for 4 to bring the curtain down on the opening day's play. So much promise for Middlesex just before tea, but no doubt at stumps. Lancashire's day with Middlesex 236 for 9 at close. Hameed's century puts Lancashire well on top at Lord's. After encouraging performances with the bat in both the morning and afternoon sessions, Middlesex's ability to self-implode was all too clear to see in the evening at Lord's on day 1 against Lancashire. The hosts closed on 236 for 9, with Gubbins and Eshkenazi's competence at the top of the order long forgotten as Bailey and Anderson collected the wickets in the main. A second batting point was the first order of the day for Middlesex, and Roland Jones and Murtagh set out their stall to achieve this. Both hit boundaries as the home team moved to 250, and they continued to press on until Bailey finally made the breakthrough in the 100th over of the innings to dismiss Roland Jones for 35, ensuring maximum bowling points for Lancashire and ending Middlesex's innings on 265. Still plenty of time for Lancashire to bat through to lunch, and Jennings and Hameed started in positive fashion. Finn and Harris came into the attack, and Hameed took a real liking to the latter, hitting 16 off his first over, taking the pair to their 50 partnership in the process. They continued to forge ahead and batted through to lunch, 88 for no wicket the score, Hameed just 3 runs shy of a 50. After the interval, it took Hameed 3 overs to bring up his half-century, but Middlesex's bowling was noticeably tighter and runs were harder to come by. The pair did move to a century partnership, and Jennings passed 50, but the visitors were definitely finding it much trickier to score. This newfound bowling discipline eventually had its reward, as Jennings nicked behind to Simpson off Harris for 52. But the new man in, Guest, established himself with Hameed, and they took the score to 150 just before the interval. It looked as though the afternoon session would once again belong to Lancashire, but a couple of wickets just before the break made it a tad more even. Guest was first to go, bowled by Murtagh for 17, and in his next over he bowled Maxwell for 1, meaning at tea the score was 155 for 3, Hameed still there though, unbeaten on 81. So 110 runs separated the teams going into the evening session, and as with the period after lunch, Middlesex's bowlers kept a tight line and runs down. However, Hameed was still able to pick off the bad ball, and it wasn't long before the lead was under 100 and Hameed was into his 90s. Hameed hadn't scored a first-class century since 2016, so nerves were to be expected as he edged closer to three figures. But in the end, he brought up his 100 in emphatic style, dispatching Roland Jones to the boundary for a 4 and then clearing the ropes for 6 with the next ball to confirm his ton. The first batting point followed, and Jones, who'd made a cautious start up the other end, started to find his feet. Several boundaries followed for the number 5, but before he and Hameed could complete their century partnership, the opener fell, caught and bowled Malan for 117. The wicket didn't slow up Jones and Lanks though, with the 23-year-old moving to his second first-class 50 as the visitors closed in on overhauling the Middlesex first innings total. They managed to do this just before the close, Lancashire reaching stumps on 267 for 4, a lead of 2, but with those 6 first innings wickets remaining, the Red Rose looking well placed heading into the second half of the match. Jones hits 100 to put Lancashire in command. Lancashire had dominated the second day's play at Lord's, a first championship century for Hameed in 2.5 years, seeing them move into the lead by 2 runs. A rain-interrupted morning saw Lancashire continue to build their advantage through Villas and Jones. Villas hit the first boundaries of the morning as the partnership went past 50. After the first break, Lancashire returned to pick up another batting point as Jones hit his 10th boundary of the innings. But the players were soon back off and an early lunch was taken with the score 308 for 4. Play resumed in the afternoon with Lancashire leading by 44, and after another brief break, Villas completed his half-century. Jones and Villas moved onto their 100 partnership, but they were unable to better the 3 batting points they'd picked up. That was of little concern to Jones, who moments later completed his second first-class century. Both of them have come against Middlesex. Villas fell soon afterwards when he was bowled by Malan for 68, leaving Lancashire 382 for 5 at tea. And Malan struck again and over after tea to remove Bohannon for 5, caught by Robson. Middlesex struck again in the following over when Murtagh bowled Bailey. The Lancashire innings was hurtling to a close when Jones finally fell for 122 when Murtagh trapped him LBW. And he claimed another wicket when Davis edged behind. All that before Lancashire were all out for 427 when Onions was bowled by Harris. That gave Lancashire a very healthy lead of 162 as the Middlesex openers began their second innings. Jimmy Addison struck in the very first over of the reply as Gubbins edged a drive to Maxwell in the slips. Middlesex went on the attack in an attempt to reduce the arrears, with Eshkenazi claiming boundaries off Bailey, and Robson took a couple of his own off Onions. However, Onions picked up the wicket of Eshkenazi LBW for 25 in the penultimate over of the day, so Middlesex ended day 3 68 for 2, still 94 runs behind, going into day 4. Maxwell takes 5, Middlesex collapse and Lancashire claim victory at Lord's. Centuries from Hameed and Jones had put Lancashire in a strong position at the end of the first innings at Lord's, and a couple of wickets before the close had left Middlesex in the position of trying to save a match for the second round in a row after they closed 94 runs behind Lancashire's first innings total with 8 second innings wickets remaining. In a solid opening hour for the hosts, Robson brought up his half-century, but things went awry in the pre-lunch period as 2 wickets fell to put Lancashire very much back on top. Harris was the first to go, caught by Guest off Bohannon for 20. And then in the very next over, Robson fell, caught Guest off Anderson for 63. Malan and Holden saw things through to the lunch break, but there was still an enormous amount of work to do for Middlesex as they trailed by 26 at the interval, with Malan unbeaten on 18. Glen Maxwell was brought into the attack and he made the breakthrough when he had Holden caught by Jennings for 7. He then removed Owen Morgan with his next delivery LBW. 6 down, skipper Milan and keeper Simpson managed to dig in for the next few overs, and then Milan began to get the scoreboard ticking over. He brought up his 50 with 40 overs left in the day, and Middlesex nudging themselves just in front. Milan became Maxwell's third victim when he departed caught by Guest for 51. And Roland Jones returned to the pavilion with just 5 runs on the board for himself, clean bowled by Jimmy Anderson. Simpson brought up the 200 in the next over before being bowled by Maxwell for 17, and Murtagh fell 2 balls later LBW to the Australian, giving Maxwell figures of 5 for 40 and reducing Middlesex to 200 all out. That left Lancs a whole session to score just 39 for victory. A brisk start from Jennings came to an equally brisk end when he was caught off the bowling of Murtagh for 8. Hameed and Guest pressed on, and with good running between the wickets they moved towards the target. However, on 26 the second wicket went down as Guest chopped onto his own stumps off Robson for 11. And Maxwell came to the crease. He looked to emulate his performance with the ball with the bat, but picked out Harris off Robson to fall for just 5. All that before Jones came in to hit the winning run to seal a 7-wicket victory for the visitors. A big win for Lancashire after a dismal collapse from Middlesex. 22 points for the Red Rose, Middlesex taking just 3.